Welcome back to yet another delightful week filled with tales that will tickle your brain cells, make you burst into uncontrollable laughter, and leave you exclaiming, "Wait, seriously? That's real?" Oh, and the best part? Don't leave us hanging. Drop those precious timestamps of the juiciest stories in the comment section so that others can look at them too. Get ready to have your mind blown and make your friends wonder what on earth you're watching. Parents, what is a rule that you never thought you would have to create, let alone enforce? Story 1. No peeking through the cat door at whoever is in the bathroom. When playing cat or dog, do not use belts or strings around your siblings' necks. In fact, we banned belts altogether because this rule didn't like to be followed. Don't jump in puddles while waiting for the school bus, and especially don't on school picture day. Please. The curtains are not meant for swinging on. We have a swing set in the backyard for this purpose. Rule for my husband, make sure curtain rods are screwed into studs. Don't open the stove for any reason, and don't put anything in there unless you are over 12 years old. Adults, please check the stove before turning it on and remove any items you may have found to prevent fire. Pants are required if you want to play outside. Shirts are also appreciated, although not required. Don't use the bathroom sink drain as a hiding place for your things. And lastly, if you find a cell phone laying around, leave it there and summon a parent. Don't throw it into the kitchen sink. Thanks. Why is there a cat door for the bathroom? I mean, I know about the entire cats like to watch you pee thing, but why are you aiding this behavior? Good place for a litter box. Story 2. Do not write on the side of the car with a rock. Seriously, I've seen pictures of kids who did that, but man, at least she wrote "I love you." My brother wrote on the side of the car with a hockey stick. When my mom was asking who did, he denied it up and down, left and right. Wasn't he? Only problem was, he wrote his name. Possible frame job. My boyfriend spray painted the neighbor kid's name when he vandalized. Never got caught either. He was like 12 at the time. No, I'm not dumping him over it. No pooping in the tub. I think we all know why I had to enact that rule. For Pete's sake, Tommy. We have ground rules for bath time that have been in place since my son was 1. Rule number 1, no pooping in the tub. Rule number 2, don't get daddy wet. Rule number 3, don't drink the bath water. Rule number 4, always remember rule number 1. He's 5 now and can still recite all the rules. My son has all the same rules. Also included is no cats in the tub. Story 3. Not a parent, but my sister has a lot of rules for my youngest niece, who's 8. I don't know all of them, but a few I had to enforce when I was watching her and her older sister were no climbing on the rails of the ferry boat, not on the inside of the boat, and absolutely not on the outside of the boat. I swear this kid is absolutely fearless, and it scares the crap out of me. Another one is to not pick up anything off the ground. She's not sure what it is, or what could happen if she picks it up. I took her to the beach once, and she was picking up stuff along the waterline. She comes back towards me with a jellyfish in her hands. The conversation went along the lines of, "What do you have in your hands there?" "It's a jellyfish. It was floating in the water." "You shouldn't pick those up. Drop them back in the water right now." "It's burning my hands." "So why are you still holding it? Drop it." "It's so cute, though." Story 4. You have to stay on the toilet until you are completely finished, even if you have something you really, really want to tell someone right now. If you're on the toilet and someone else urgently needs it, just let me finish my chapter is not an acceptable response. No changing the words of songs just because you know it will make your sister cry. My mom used to look through the linen closet into the bathroom to catch me or my brothers reading books. We'd take her long bathroom breaks to skip chores and just read books in the bathroom. It got to a point where my mom would take away books from us as a punishment and knew our hiding spots for the books we kept as backups. In hindsight, it's a good thing none of us were experimenting with ourselves during those bathroom breaks. Story 5. Easy. I have 2 sons. One is 7 and one is 3. I had to enforce a rule for the 3-year-old called no headbutting at the dinner table. No headbutting at the dinner table, for Pete's sake. The 7-year-old is so gentle and timid, and the 3-year-old is an absolute psycho with 0 fear. I'm not sure if it's a youngest child thing or he's just mental. I think you're supposed to leave a little mystery as to who's your favorite. Story time. Dad had a favorite, the middle child, the only daughter. Not me, I'm the eldest son. I'm 13 and I'm in child counseling. Somehow we got him to one of my weekly sessions. I'd gone for about 2 years. He's forced to listen to how my sister is the favorite. He storms out. For the next 11 years, until he passes away, she is his number one most hated person. Complete 180. Story 6. Your penis is not a sprinkler. You can't stand when going potty if you're pooping. The first came from my son, standing in a circle and spraying the whole bathroom with pee. He said he wanted to see how many times around he could get before he ran out of pee. The answer is 3. The second came after finding piles of poop covered in toilet paper in front of the toilet. Wow, your son sucks. I can get at least 5 every time. I remember doing something equally stupid when I was very little. For some stupid reason, I wanted to pee on the floor next to the toilet, so I did. I swapped back and forth between the toilet and the floor about 5 times. Just a quick back and forth motion. My parents weren't too pleased about my decision. I wasn't too pleased either when they made me clean up the mess. I had good parents. I never did it again. Story 7. We have so many. Just a few. No pee jars or bottles. Discovered a jar full of pee in the family room closet. Turns out 7-year-old didn't want to go to the bathroom, so he peed in the jar. Discovered bottle in teenager's room. No locking siblings in a closet. No picking anyone up by their ears. No putting siblings in recycling or trash bins. No stickers or suckers on the dog. Also, no waffles on the cat. No putting pancakes between your toes. No banana fights. No JINX. My favorite, I can protect you from your siblings in video games or real life. Pick. We have the no jinx rule too. That just led to too many arguments and tears. For frick's sake, if you can't play it right, you won't play it at all. Story 8. A few of the rules my mom had to create for my sister, the problem child. Don't put pickles in your pockets. No idea what the kid logic was on this one. No stuffing toys in your pant legs. Sister would do this to sneak toys into school. Don't stick gum on the wall behind your bed. Sister had a collection of it back there at one point. It was impossible to enforce this rule effectively. Pretty sure sister still keeps gum on her wall to this day. Empty your pockets before coming into the house. Sister had a habit of picking up anything and everything she saw on the ground and then putting it in her room. There were lots of others. As the relatively clean, relatively normal child, I was pretty much constantly scratching my head at my crazy hoarder sister. Still do. Story 9. Not a parent, but when I was a kid, my parents contacted our neighborhood Blockbuster and told them never to let me rent any crime or gangster movies, period. I used to watch these movies and spout off all the expletive-laden dialogues. Started using the F word around then too. This was when I was 10 or 11. The last straw was when, right after dinner, my dad told me to do something, don't remember what, after which I looked at my mom like I was appalled and said, "You believe this piece of crap?" I watched Trailer Park Boys at around 14 or 15. My parents have always been tolerant of cursing, but when I started throwing the F word around every other word, they finally told me I sound like a freaking idiot. Story 10. Don't bite your toenails. You may only play with your wiener in your own room, not on the living room couch. No dueling in the house. You may not put your little sister in any appliance, including but not limited to the washer, the dryer, the oven, the chest freezer, and the dishwasher. Me and my brother used to play hide and seek. He loved hiding in the dryer. I loved finding him by turning it on. My cat used to nap in the dryer. One day he was in it while I was in a hurry, forgot to check, and turned it on. Thunk, thunk, thunk. I open the door and the poor mustard falls out and runs off. My cat hasn't gotten in that dryer since. Story 11. My daughter has pica. It was hard when she was younger because she put everything in her mouth. It was so bad that I couldn't put her on the floor to explore. As a result, she didn't crawl until she was 15 months old. She ate a bunch of things, but the worst was rocks and several pairs of Barbie doll shoes. The neighbor's daughter was distraught over the shoes and didn't want them back. Her first day at daycare, I warned them about it. She came home with glitter and stickers in her poop. She's almost 14 now. Thank God she outgrew that one. Keep your dirty jokes to yourself, please. Story 13. My kids were playing Harry Potter one day, running around waving wands at each other, when one cast the killing curse on the other. This was followed by an argument and a bunch of yelling, which led to a rule I never thought I'd have to enforce: no dark arts in the house. So I told my mom about this thread and asked if she could think of any such rule. She couldn't. I gave her this one as an example of my favorite. This was her response. I get it, but kids need to explore the dark arts as a means of coming to terms with the existence of evil. She's an educator. I love your mom. Story 14. Don't sit in the toilet. When you're done going potty, call for mom or wipe yourself and get up. Don't slowly sink down into the toilet. I fell once when I was little. I thought I was going to pass away alone inside a toilet, legs up, butt in water. Thank God my mom rescued me. I can only imagine how hilarious that must have looked in retrospect. I've always been very small, and at a very young age, I slipped in once, needing my mom to help me out. When she'd stop laughing, of course. Story 16. No licking the bus. No licking your hand, then touching the bus, then licking your hand. No licking your hand, touching the bus, then putting your finger in mama's ear. No licking mama's hand. No licking mama's ear. In fact, if we could just put a moratorium on licking things, that would be super. He's not quite 2. He licks. You got a wet willy from a 1-year-old? Impressive. He's very advanced. He's gross at a 3rd grade level. What's the worst display of incompetence you've ever witnessed? Story 1. In the early 90s, I worked at a small mom-and-pop ad agency. There were less than 10 employees. I was a graphic designer and spent most of my days behind a 21-inch CRT creating illustrations of food for several weekly newspaper inserts. The company had been doing weekly inserts like this for over 20 years, 4 years digitally, and had a pretty good library of artwork stored on the server. But as product packaging changed, or new products were released, it was our responsibility to create it. For this task, we had a monthly stipend from the advertiser to purchase items as required so that we could photograph them, get them into our system, and photo illustrate them. Now, let me introduce a man named Floyd. Floyd was an elderly gentleman. If I had to guess, he was 70, if he was a day. He was our driver. As an ad agency, often you're running film and stats and other printing press type things across town last minute to make deadlines. It makes sense to have a driver. Floyd was good at being a driver. We gave him an address and he went there. And he dropped off what he had. Not much thought goes on. However, one late Wednesday afternoon, we're on deadline. Grocery inserts go in the Thursday morning papers, and I learned very late that we're missing the new bag art for the 10-pound bag of Alpo dog food that's on sale tomorrow. As far as my job goes, this is about as panicked as I can get. Aside from a computer meltdown, there was not much else that could go wrong in my position. I didn't have time to run to the store, which I usually did, had I planned well. Everyone else was elbows and buttholes on their computers, trying to hit the deadline. The only available body was Floyd, sitting in the corner, legs crossed, reading the newspaper. "Hey, Floyd, I need you to do me a huge favor." "Sure." "Take this credit card and run to redacted store. I need a 10-pound bag of Alpo. Hurry back quickly. I have to get this done before 6:30 when you drive over the film." "Roger that." And off he goes for 45 minutes. Never mind that it's a 5-minute drive to the store, should have taken 20 minutes max. No cell phones, not reasonably priced anyway, and definitely not ubiquitous. So I wait. And finally Floyd walks in, with a 10-pound bag of store-brand dog food. "Floyd, here's your dog food. Where's the Alpo?" "Oh, this was cheaper. I saved like $3. "Floyd, we don't have a freaking dog." Snatches the card from his hand and runs out the door to get the Alpo myself. To this day, I still can't remember if I made it back on time, if I made the 6:30 delivery, but the legend of Floyd will live on in my mind forever. In his defense, you didn't specify it was actually for an ad. On the other hand, literally everything about the situation and your job and the job he does as a result should have made that very clear. Story 2. I work in construction. Incompetence is a daily occurrence. In no particular order, number 1, crane operator overcompensated and slammed the 35-ton air handler he was placing on the roof into the wall of the hospital. Number 2, the medical gas certification company didn't check all the outlets on a line, just the last one. Well, he screwed up and read the gauges wrong, passed the system, and it went into operation. 2 weeks later, a patient is brought into the ER and requires oxygen. So they hook him up to the oxygen wall outlet. Only problem is that during construction, some dumb guy got the lines crossed, and the oxygen outlet was actually connected to the vacuum line. Patient was fine, after some well-deserved freaking out. Number 3, all shaft walls are 2-hour rated. UL listed enclosures for fire safety, and this is strictly enforced and doubly so in hospitals. Well, some hospital maintenance guy decided that the exhaust fan the hospital was putting in on the sly needed to have the ductwork go up this shaft. So he punched a 4x4 hole in it and ran some ductwork through it. Never sealed the hole, no fire or smoke dampers, no nothing. We found it during a demo when we renovated the area. Number 4, during an inspection there was a problem with the way the sprinkler heads were installed. Nothing major, just needed to tighten some uplifts restraints. Well, you need to be licensed to work on that stuff. So the idiot plumber decides, hey, I've got a wrench and can tighten crap. So he climbs on the ladder and starts going to town in front of the inspector. Came very close to failing the inspection. Number 5, everyone is complaining that there is no hot water in half the hospital and starts blaming my design. Okay, let me look. Well, idiot plumber put all of the check valves backwards, so no hot water was allowed out of the system. Number 6, found a fire smoke damper propped open with a 2x4. Number 7, previous contractor did not reconnect the storm pipes under the slab before repouring the concrete. Every time it rained, water would bubble up through the floor tiles and flood the EKG lab. Hospital didn't investigate until a patient slipped. They had just been sending a dude with a mop to clean the floor. There are so many more. Number 8, an electrical ground wire zip-tied to a 1-inch oxygen line. Number 9, 2-inch main hospital oxygen line installed above the main kitchen hood. Number 10, maintenance removed all the supply diffusers from the main hallway that had a west-facing wall, a 60-foot-long wall of glass and no shade because they didn't see the need for it during the last renovation. Well, then don't complain to me when the insulation on the chilled water piping is soaked like a sponge and you have a nice brown line on your ceiling tiles showing the pin path, and the room is hotter than Satan's armpit. Number 3, the collective group of people that form Aetna. I've been dealing with claims from my mother's visit to the ER last year, and I never understand how they haven't gone out of business with that level of incompetence. The ER doctor sent us a bill for $1,335. We're supposed to be responsible for $178. All right then, I paid that amount. 2 months later, the ER doctor sent us a bill for the remaining balance. I called Aetna, and they promised to reprocess it. 2 months went by. Nothing. Meanwhile, we got the same bill from the doctor every other week, nagging for payment. I called for the same thing 15 more times. That spanned the course of 6 months. Finally, in March, someone processed it and sent out a check to us. Surprise, surprise, it never came. In May, I called and they said somehow the check went missing. They reissue it. 5 calls, and 1 month later, no check. In June, I got someone who finally processed it, and 2 days later, a check came. Guess what? It's $266 less than what we still owe the doctor. I've made about 5 calls since June, and still no payment in sight. One rep after another promised me they'd send it in to be reprocessed, and nothing ever happened. I've been disputing this claim for 13 months, and still no end in sight. Do the people at Aetna's claim department sit around reading BuzzFeed all day? Oh, bonuses! There was also a claim from my father that was processed as out-of-network while the provider was in-network. That took 5 calls and 3 months to be resolved. Also, right now, I see about 20 claims for her physical therapy sessions that are covered 100% since her deductible is maxed out, but they processed it as out-of-network and claim we owe the therapist $3,000. At this point, Aetna is even higher than ISIS on my top most hated organizations. If they have a Facebook or Twitter page, I advise you bombard it with this crap. Bad publicity usually gets a company off its butt. Story 4. Probably Slingshot Tim, a guy I used to work with who managed to slingshot himself into an office table during a meeting. Tim was the definition of an unnecessary hire. His dad was one of our most important suppliers at the time, so the boss was forced to hire him for a job he basically couldn't do, but also couldn't ever really be fired for. It was the moron's sweet spot. During one meeting with Tim, I saw him lean really far back in his chair during a meeting, far enough back that the chair started to creak loudly. So far, so standard. But Tom had done this maneuver without turning the little knob thing under the chair to give himself a little slack, so he had to push really hard against the base of the table to stay in his casual position. It looked like a surprising amount of effort. Tim was visibly sweating to stay cool, Eventually, Tim couldn't take it anymore and ended up slipping about 2/3 of the way into the meeting. Thanks to physics, the lack of tension shot his chair forward, throwing him into the conference table. He took the entire desk to the chest, shaking the projector enough to unplug it from the wall and spilling more than a few cups of coffee. It was the most hilariously loud and stupid thing I've ever seen in a meeting. Even people walking by the conference room completely stopped to witness this grown man turn himself into a human catapult. He picked himself up off the floor in a daze, then started hurriedly packing up his stuff amidst uproarious laughter and ran out of the room. I'm not sure if Tim still works there, but I'm definitely sure the legend of Slingshot Tim endures to this day. Our latest crime-fighting superhero, Slingshot Tim. Story 5. I was working with an older transportation engineer at work. The guy had literally designed hundreds of miles of highways, interchanges, and roadways. He was helping to write a 100-page document that I was an editor on. He took the document without speaking to any other member of the team and sent it out to 20 different people for their input without track changes on it. He said he thought that if he didn't change the name of the document, that it would just automatically update on our server when they made changes to it. In the end, I ended up with more than 25 versions of it that I was checking line by line for changes at all hours of the night because it was due in several days and some of the changes conflicted. Ugh. I explained the whole issue to him once I was finished fixing it all, but he did it again on another smaller document a month later. Then he retired suddenly. I think that they asked him to leave because his skills stopped developing in the 1970s, and because he stole food from work all the time, even though he was rich. Don't miss him one bit. Holy crap, we track changes via Google Docs on stupid fanfic edits. I can't imagine not doing that in an office setting. Story 6. This story doesn't end with someone almost dying or anything, but it was the moment where I realized just how incompetent the company's middle management was. I work for a luxury retail company. My manager had been having issues getting into the hiring system to post job openings and push through resumes. He hadn't had access to it since he was hired, for whatever reason. He had been trying to sort it out for months because school was starting up again and he knew he needed more staff. He had been in an exchange with the person in charge of hiring, and he kept explaining he didn't have access to the system. All the person had to do was email him a link to reset the password, and he was golden. He gets an email saying that she will put it on her list of things to do today. She sent him an email saying she would send him an email with the link when she could have sent him the link immediately. We still don't have access to the hiring system, and it's been a month. I hate people that do that crap. She should be fired. Story 7. I work at a golf course. The manager asked the old incompetent guy, whose wife begged the manager to give him a job so he'd get out of the house, to clean the yardage markers, middle of the fairway at 250, 200, 150, 100. He was doing stuff before that, so around 11:30, when the course is packed, he drives out and sits down in the middle of the fairways so he can use a wet wipe to wipe off these markers. A couple of us were all finishing up on the same hole, so we were talking. What the frick is he doing? We finally drove over, waved the players off. Oh, I didn't realize there were people playing. 11:30 at a golf course. When exactly did you think people played golf? Then he does the same thing, goes out to trim tree branches on trees more or less in the middle of the fairway. This is a 65-year-old man. I'm 25. I had to drive out there and tell him, Joe, you cannot be standing here trimming while people are aimed straight at you. Maybe that is the way he wanted to become deceased. Bailed. What is the most inoffensive thing you've seen someone get offended by? Story 1. Maybe 22 years ago, I had a phone interview with a baking company. I didn't care to have my peers know what I was up to, so I took the call on my cell phone in my car. The call was crystal clear and had no technical issues. At one point, they had mentioned the weather and asked how it was where I was. I told them that I was sitting in my car and I could see that it was actively snowing and whatnot. The interviewer asked me, "Are you taking this call on a cell phone?" I told him I was. Then he asked me if I thought that was appropriate. I asked him what he meant by that. He said he thought it was kind of rude to take a formal call on a cell phone. I told him I would be more than happy to conclude the interview if talking on a cell phone was an issue. If he was interested, I'd be happy to continue it the next day when I'd be at a desk. He again repeated how rude he thought it was that I had called from a cell phone and that there was no need to continue the interview process. I disagreed with the first point, but did agree with the second. To this day, I wonder what the heck he was talking about and where he was coming from. Wow, way to stamp "I am an aging worker who refuses to keep up with technology" on his forehead. Only thing I can guess is the possibility of a dropped call, but like you said, it was completely clear. Story 2. I still remember in kindergarten when my friend and I were reading all the colors out loud on one of those Crayola super packs. I got straight up yelled at and sent to the principal's office for saying "orange pizza" because the teacher said I called someone a pea-butt and would not listen, despite having the crayon as evidence. After a 30-minute scolding and waiting for my mom to leave work to pick me up for my suspension, she came in all apologetic. When I explained to her the whole situation, not the school side, Ma went ape crap. I'd heard her say crap once. That's the only swear I ever heard from her, and we had just been rear-ended in traffic. "How about chunt? Can he say chunt? 'Cause you're all being chunts right now. This is freaking ridiculous!" And just went off while I'm sitting there all, "huh?" And the principal is just red as frick. I got unsuspended on the spot, but she pulled me out of school for the day anyway. We had a lovely day, and she explained very well how I shouldn't swear like that, unless absolutely necessary, and I've exhausted all civility. When being civil simply isn't working, sometimes you might have to call someone a pea-butt. The next day at school, I learned that I now had the stigma of being the kid who got the Crayola Super Pack taken away. Story 3. We were choosing a mascot for a summer camp where I worked. It was the first day of camp, and we'd always let the campers vote on a mascot that we'd use for the rest of the summer as sort of a bonding thing. This year, the kids voted for wolves as the mascot. It was almost unanimous. But one kid, probably about 9 or 10, threw a fit because wolves are bad guys and predators and killers, and he didn't want to be a wolf. He wants to be a hero. He refused to participate in any team activities because he didn't want to be on a team with the bad guys. At one point, we brought in a guy in a full mascot wolf costume for some anti-bullying program, and the kid had a massive tantrum. I almost felt like we were going to learn at some point that his brother was killed by wolves or some other tragic origin story. I did feel bad for the boy because I was fairly certain he had some kind of unaddressed emotional difficulties or something, but we weren't going to change the mascot name that almost everyone voted for. The really sad thing is that wolf populations have suffered a lot due to stereotypes that they're bad. I imagine all the werewolves at the camp were just awkwardly sitting there wondering whether to speak up or not. Story 4. I had a pastor that insisted we call candy canes Jesus sticks because Christmas is all about Jesus, y'all. Ain't no fun to be had otherwise. Well, I was 7 and accidentally referred to the holy Jesus stick as a candy cane in his presence. And I kid you not, he speed walked over to my dad to tell on me and carry on about how offensive it is to see all the world trying to remove Christ from Christmas. It starts in the home, den of sin without Jesus, something dark side. My dad asked him if he was serious. Spoiler, he was very, very serious, and then told him to grow the heck up. And that's how my dad dressed up as Santa a couple weeks later and came into the church yelling, "Ho, ho, ho, candy canes!" while passing said satanic candy canes to all the little children during the children's church portion of service. The pettiness runs deep, and it was delicious. Jesus Christ, I mean, the guy could have at least insisted on calling them shepherd's crooks, since, that's the intention behind the shape. But no, let's go with the vaguely dirty-sounding Jesus sticks. Story 5. Using a walking stick. I was in a car accident a few years ago, and it messed up my leg. Since then, I've been using a walking stick. I was walking to a shop, pre-pandemic, and an old bloke gave me the dirtiest look I've ever seen. "What do you need a cane for? You're only a kid." He actually got quite short with me just seeing me use the stick. Like, "My dude, I'm just out trying to buy some milk. I don't need your crap today." I didn't say that out loud. I just said it to myself after I got home. People like that are the reason my partner doesn't like going out. He's had a few operations on his back and needs his stick as one of his legs that has been left weaker than the other. He's had someone try and take his stick as he's walking. I nearly battered them. Story 6. This guy at a Halloween party I was at was dressed in a giant bacon costume. Some girl was yelling at him for being so offensive toward Jews and Muslims. She was neither Jewish nor Muslim. One of the Muslim guys at the party asked her what the F she was talking about, but she didn't back down. I have no idea why people feel they need to go out of their way to be inaccurately offended on behalf of others. Reminds me of a news story I saw a while ago. A Muslim family moved to a mostly white town. The white people decided it would help them feel more welcome if they removed every book from the library that had anything to do with pigs or bacon. I guess just because you can't eat it, you shouldn't see it or read about it either. Story 7. A freaking picture of an eye. We have an organization-wide theme every year, and all the PCs on our network have the same background and theme, which can't be changed. So this year's theme is Vision is 2020, and the background was a zoomed-in picture of an eye in really awesome colors. 2 women on staff wrote letters to complain that the picture was heathen, as it drew from Illuminati imagery and paid tribute to the all-seeing eye of Egyptian deities. They whined and complained to such an extent that the picture was eventually changed to shut them up and let the normal folks get back to our actual work. This clearly proves how much of an idiot these women were. The Illuminati eye is always depicted within a triangle, which I'm safely assuming wasn't the case. Story 8. Typing in someone's phone number to activate their rewards card. Finished typing it in, found her name, proceeded with the transaction, and said, "You're good to go." The woman replied with, "What is that supposed to mean?" And she gave me a fiery glare, as if I just kicked her toddler across the store. "It means I found your information. You'll get your points." The woman, "Oh, okay then." I still can't figure out why she flipped out like that. It was a rewards card. She got her points and she got her discount. What? The only possible way I can imagine getting offended by this is from never having heard that phrase before and assuming it meant, "I would like you to leave." But even then, that is quite an assumption. Story 9. Had someone get offended by me calling my brother bro. They insisted that I was racist and that white people can't be related to Mexicans. Like a serious lady. That's not how genetics work. We are 100% related and are a mix of white and Native American. It's not that unheard of for one biological sibling to come out lighter or darker than the other. And even if we weren't related, seriously, I'm racist for calling someone close to me my bro, despite being different skin tones? Seriously? Thank you for coming to my rant session. Have a good day. I had someone scoff and ask me how I, a white person, have a Latina cousin. It's like they don't realize 2 people of different races can have kids together. What do people think is a scam, but they actually just don't understand it? Story 1. Getting a raise that gets you to a higher tax bracket. Seriously, people don't even use Google to verify it. When you get a tax raise, only the portion of the salary that goes above the bracket is getting the higher taxes. And you absolutely cannot convince them otherwise. They won't hear it. About a decade ago, I worked as an auto detailer when I was trying to get my foot in the door, and the shop paid a flag rate. That meant that a job paid a fixed amount of hours, no matter how long it took you to do it, thus rewarding expertise and efficiency. A detailed job on a car could pay a flag rate of 3.2 hours, but if you were efficient and lucky, it might only take 2 hours. Drawback is sometimes it takes 4 and still only pays 3.2. So better than average mechanics and detailers could easily get 12 to 14 hours in an 8 to 10 hour day. It wasn't uncommon to see 140-hour paychecks for 80 to 100 hours of work. But I still knew people who would never go above 80 or 100 hours flagged because, quote, "If I get more hours, the government will just take more taxes out." Yeah, dumb guy, but you'll also be taking home a frick load more money at $16 an hour. Dude, I worked payroll for a while, and people kept filing in for the last paycheck of the year to change their withholding to single, so they'd get more money back. They would then come in for the first paycheck of the year and change their withholding status to married and add their children in. They swore up and down that if they did this, they'd get a higher tax return. 3 years ago, people did this, and I could not explain it to some of them, and I have no clue who put this idea in their heads. I've been around money-strapped people most of my life and never heard of this. Tax returns are based on the actual amount withheld, not the status on your W-4. So if you change your status to single and leave it that way, more money is withheld from your check, and your return is bigger. But that's because you didn't take the pay home to begin with. Edit. Half of you guys aren't getting it. They weren't actually withholding their pay. They would change it for a single pay period, and then they would think that they'd get the money as though they'd withheld it for the full year. This is precisely why CPAs exist, to interpret the confusing tax code for the layperson. But also I feel that the whole process is purposefully kept overcomplicated by having us enter all our information every year to file returns. For the most part, the government has the ability to calculate how much you owe or overpaid throughout the year, and, if all your income was over the table, that is. But because the U.S. has this notion of being screwed over by paying taxes, we are incentivized to get the best deal for ourselves. I forget which country it is that does this, but they give a pie chart breakdown of exactly how your tax contributions are being spent to improve society. If we had that level of visibility in the U.S. and could actually feel the impact of the collective efforts in paying taxes to better the community we live in, I think there'd be less frustration. Story 2. Preventative dental maintenance. I've lost count of the people who have proudly told me over the years that having your teeth cleaned by a hygienist is a scam, and that plaque is not really a thing. I've also had a surprisingly large number of seemingly rational people tell me that dentists create holes in your teeth so they can scam you with fillings. The fact that I have had at least 2 dentists tell me I have cavities that follow-ups with other dentists couldn't find, and that one tried to upsell me on braces that I don't need, makes me pretty wary too. Maybe I just have teeth that heal between visits, but I doubt it. Hashtag not all dentists, of course, but I've seen some bad ones. I had a dentist that was awesome for so many years. He was great, honest, and did really good work for fair prices. Then one day he moved offices, which I thought wasn't a big deal. My next visit with him was totally different. He suddenly told me I was grinding my teeth at night and needed to have the tops of all my teeth bonded to protect them. That he'd max out my insurance for the year and then proceed once the new calendar year started. I've had a chip in a tooth bonded before and it has fallen out twice over time. It's normal, bonding doesn't last, and sure as hell won't last long when it is on the biting surface. He also said he really thought I needed to have a few whitening treatments along with it. They wanted an ungodly amount of money for this procedure, and it just didn't feel right. When I left the office, they asked when I wanted to make an appointment for that work, and I declined, to which the receptionist wanted me to sign a copy of the chart showing I declined work to protect them from legal action. I might take from the negative health effects of declining important dental work. I declined, left, and some weeks later, they mailed me a copy of the chart like some kind of weird threat. None of it made any sense. Try to dig around and find a dentist that is still independent. It makes a huge difference. The ones that are part of these new-owned groups will push services hard and will make diagnoses that are often BS so they can rake in the cash. Okay, I definitely get why people are kind of wary of dentists. They can be pretty creepy overall. And that's coming from someone whose best friend is a dentist. I always think back to Dr. Barber from The Misadventures of Flapjack. Surgery, yes. That is one shifty fellow. If you want a trustworthy dentist, you gotta find a guy named Crentist. Crentist the dentist. That's the guy to go to. Story 3. Hello, we've been trying to reach you about an important safety recall notice for your vehicle. Edit. Alright guys, serious stuff here. Go get your recalls fixed. Quit screwing around. It's a dangerous business. Call a dealership. Ask if there are any recalls. Get them done. I mean it. Edit 2. Moreover, I'm glad I've helped educate some people in the seriousness of this topic. Best part of this is that potentially I've helped some people not perish from the Takata CLAYMORE style airbag train wreck. Something I learned when car shopping years ago: if you're worried there's been a recall on your vehicle, call your local dealership. They'll ask you for the VIN number. They'll be able to tell you right away if there's been a recall. Had a shifty salesman try to sell me a car with multiple recalls. He swore up and down that everything had been taken care of and nothing needed to be replaced. I called my dad to ask, since we had a 10-week-old infant that would be riding in the car. He gave me the above advice. As it turned out, the car had 3 major recalls that hadn't been taken care of. Edit. Since some people are getting unreasonably angry with me for not buying the car, I'll clarify. Recalls are free to fix, and I wouldn't have had a problem doing it. But when I directly ask, there's been recalls with this, is everything taken care of? And I get the answer that yes, everything is taken care of, and yes, they're sure, only to find out I'm being lied to. Why would I buy from them? It was a used car place. They weren't a dealership. We decided to go to a dealership instead. You can also go to nhtsa.gov/recalls, if you're in the US at least, or your car manufacturer's website to check for open recalls. Just Google car manufacturer recalls. Should be within the first couple of results. Story 4. Literally anything that requires a signature. Confirmation that they've seen their doctor's care plan and we've reviewed it with them, refuse to sign. Financial form that will get them free medications that normally cost over $1,000 a month, refuse to sign. Form that allows us to provide them a nutritional supplement at no additional cost, refuse to sign. Refusing a flu vaccine that could prevent them and the rest of the clinic from dying over the winter, and then also refusing to sign the form confirming that they've refused the vaccine. I had a friend who refused to sign her credit card because, if it gets stolen, they'll be able to copy my signature. I tried to convince her that if it's not signed, they won't even have to try to copy it. They can just use their own. But she wouldn't believe me. One time I was trying to pay for something with a new card, and I'd forgotten to sign it. Person tries to compare the signature to a form I just signed in front of them, alerting me to the fact that there's actually no signature on the card. I say, "Oh, sorry, forgot," and sign the card on the desk right in front of their nose. They then compare the signature to the form I signed 1 minute before. Yup, checks out. Payment approved. What? What kind of security measure is that? Some gas pumps only hold $1, so you can effectively get a full tank of gas a day or two before payday. On the other end of the spectrum, I've hit truck stops on I-95 that do a $150 authorization on my credit card when I begin to pump. Startled me the first time. Since the merchant name wasn't very descriptive, I thought the card was compromised, until I figured out what had happened. People who lost their virginity after age 35, or never did, what's your story? You know, I've heard from reading things on the internet that if you reach the age of 30 or so and you still haven't lost your virginity, that you acquire some sort of wizard powers. I certainly can't speak to that myself. As you guys know, I'm married and I have a kid, so at least he's proof that something happens. Anyway, we'll see if the stories today speak to that degree in whatever capacity. Let's begin. Story 1. I'm 40 and still a virgin, something I never thought I'd be freely admitting on the internet to strangers, but there you go. Basically, my parents told me from a really young age that I was ugly and weird and no one would want me. Any boy I did get close with, my mom pretty much scared away within a few days, then told everyone it hadn't worked out because I wasn't interested in that sort of thing. To this day, I don't know why she did this. Maybe it was a control thing, or she had some kind of hang-up herself. No idea. Of course, people at school picked up on this, especially at primary school, since my mother taught at the school I attended, and so made comments about my appearance in front of the other students, who gleefully picked this up as prime bullying material. Anyway, the upshot was that by the time I left home at 18 and went to college, I was convinced that I was ugly and weird, and no one would want to go near me. I didn't bother taking care of myself or making any effort because I'd always been told there was no point. So it became a vicious circle kind of thing. I'm by no means a beauty, but I realize now I'm not as hideous as everyone made me out to be. Even when I eventually realized that my mom was nuts and I had to be my own person, the damage was kind of done. No matter how much I try to be confident now, there's always that big bit of me that thinks, do I have a right to use a dating app? When really I'm such a waste of space, or doesn't want to try anything like Tinder or whatever because you need to upload a picture, and a big part of me thinks it'll put people off. People pick up on that lack of confidence when I speak to them in real life, and it puts people off, which then eats away at my self-esteem even more, to the point where I really don't know how to fix this. To make matters worse, I got breast cancer 6 years ago, and had to have some pretty extreme reconstruction because of the type of tumor it was and the damage it did, so I'm now covered in scars. The one bit of my body I used to be proud of was my boobaloobaloobies, and now they're completely horrible. I know I've pushed people away, and can think of numerous times when men were hitting on me, and I either didn't realize it or didn't want to admit it because I was scared I was interpreting things wrongly, and would end up making a fool of myself. So I reckon it's self-isolation for me for the foreseeable future. The That's a sad one. It's hard to overcome the doubts that we have in our minds that's either self-inflicted or imposed by others in our life, wrongfully so. But it's such a great feeling when you can finally embrace who you are and just know from the bottom of your heart that you are beautiful just the way that you are. Sure, you can change little things here and there, but you don't want to change who you are at your core, because everybody's beautiful in their own right. And I can prove that because I learned that from a story called The Ugly Barnacle. He was so ugly that everybody died. The end. Story 2. I have a friend like this. He's 45. He had an inane list of criteria a woman must meet before he even dates her. It may have been plausible when he was younger, but now I wish him good luck. I have a friend like this who is still young, and it scares me how whacked up his idea of a suitable girlfriend is. He's usually a genuinely nice person, but holy cow, when it comes to a potential girlfriend, she apparently has to like exactly the anime he likes and exactly the anime he hates. I'm sure you can picture the exact condescending, "This is an important screening test I have designed to put you through to determine your nerd cred" tone, in the way that a comic book neckbeard might have. Cook and clean after him, but not just that. She has to cook amazing, perfect Italian food and Japanese food. So preferably she is both ethnically Italian and Japanese, but at the same time she needs to be fluent in English, she needs to be Catholic, she needs to code, and she also has to have the exact views and preferences on coding, coding languages, and on tech devices, which he has. But she can't just be meek and agree with everything he says. She has to argue and engage in debate with him, and then ultimately concede that he is correct. She also needs to be curvy with a large chest, on and on. Our mutual friend basically thinks he just sets himself up with that clearly insane and unreasonable list as a cover for himself, just being too socially awkward, insecure, and nervous to approach women romantically. It's double weird because he can have female friends just fine. He makes friends of both genders really easily and casually. The crazy only comes out if you ask him why he won't romantically date a given girl. Story 3. 30-year-old male virgin. Never happened for me in college, despite being sociable and having a pretty large group of friends and acquaintances, and being in the type of environment where it should have been easy. I kind of just assumed it would happen at some point. Maybe I would have been more aggressive if I knew what was in store for me. Then for most of my early or mid-20s, my suffering through unemployment and underemployment mixed with the accompanying depression, which made me very uninterested in pursuing relationships and was more concerned with staying alive. I got my first steady 9-to-5 job at 26, but kept putting it off because I was convinced I needed to make more money, establish myself, get my ducks in a row, etc., before anyone would be interested in me. And now I'm 30. I'm absolutely terrified to put myself out there because I know the virgin thing will come up at some point, and I know it's not normal, unless maybe you're religious. Like, just imagining having to explain it to someone my age after 2 or 3 dates, yikes. So yeah, good times. Edit, just wanted to say thanks for the kind words and different perspectives. It's encouraging to hear other people's experiences. I definitely think I'm getting a bit too in my head about this, which I have a tendency to do. I'll probably make the decision about whether to disclose or not on an individual basis. I know even if it might make some hypothetical girl uncomfortable, it's not the end of the world, and there will be others for whom it's not a big deal. Just have to put myself out there more. Good thing there's a pandemic going on. Yeah, the very last thing that this guy said is probably the truest out of everything. You just have to put yourself out there. There is something for everybody, and there's someone for everybody. Everybody's got their own various kinks. Maybe some people like that this guy's a virgin. Who knows? And you won't ever know unless you put yourself out there. And I think that's the key. Sometimes you get overwhelmed seeing the vastness of availability, and especially being on dating apps, there's just endless amounts of people that you can cycle through. And it's hard to just narrow it down and just kind of accept somebody and settle. I mean, you don't want to settle for somebody. Definitely have standards, but if you are too hard on yourself, you're just going to put it off forever and ever. You're never going to be perfect, and you just have to roll the dice and see what happens. Spouses of an identical twin, what was your most embarrassing moment with the other twin? Yeah, okay, I have a feeling that all of these stories are going to be completely appropriate, and nobody is going to get in any sort of hijinks whatsoever. Let's find out. Story 1. Dated an identical twin in college. At times, they suffered from what some call single personality syndrome. They would do everything together. All decisions were made together. Even simple things. They would wake up in the morning and say, "What are we wearing today?" Just giving some context for the story. As I said, I dated this girl in college, and she and her sister lived together. Now, the entire time we dated, her sister was single. This more or less made her sister the third wheel in everything we did as a couple. It was like dating both of them without the perks of dating both of them. I know what you're thinking. One time, the three of us went on a short 4-day cruise in the Caribbean. On the ship, we kind of all did our own thing. One morning, I got up and went to the gym, and the girls went to breakfast. When I got back to the room, I saw who I thought was my girlfriend back in the bed, thinking up her shirt. She turns her head, and to my horror, I realize that it's her sister and not my girlfriend. We quickly had a brief moment of alone time. I climbed in the bed, spooned up behind her, and started kissing her neck, and ran back away and said, "OMG, I am so sorry." She took it like a champ. She shrugged, smiled, and said, "It was bound to happen at some point." She also alluded to the fact that this might have happened before with guys that came before me. As far as I know, she never told my girlfriend, and I sure as heck was not going to tell her. Plot twist, it was your girlfriend. That was a test, and that's why she broke it off. You didn't tell her. Story 2. Mandatory I am not a spouse, but when I was 17, I dated one from a set of identical twin girls. Their parents were of the school of thought that one must have one of whatever the other had. So as a consequence, and completely predictable, they would pretend to be the other for fun. We were swimming at a lake near the town we lived in, and they showed up in identical bathing suits, jewelry, purses, flip-flops, towels, cell phones, watches, and food. We started swimming, and as teenagers are absolutely disgusting, started to fool around. I thought I was kissing my girlfriend when she laughed, pulled away, and said, "You're right, he does use too much tongue." My budding arousal vanished in embarrassment, and I was so confused I wouldn't touch either of them until they agreed to drink different beverages so I could keep track. My girlfriend wasn't mad, and in hindsight being 2020, I should have just gone with it, but I didn't. I left as soon as possible because they kept alternating, teasing me, in a physical sort of way, and then changing. Teenage me couldn't handle that kind of pressure. It's like when you're at a party and you don't want to mix up your drink with anybody else's, so you write your initials on it or something to make it unique. Except they went to the extreme, and they gave different drinks to the girls so that they wouldn't mix them up. Could have just initialed the girls. Story 3. My mother has an identical twin, my aunt, obviously, so this is a story about my aunt's spouse. Apparently, scent, among many other things, has a genetic component, so an oddity we discovered in my childhood is that our family dog, a cute miniature schnauzer, was completely unable to tell my mom and my aunt apart. When my aunt would come over to visit, our dog would walk in the room, look back and forth between them, and just whine for a while. The world was apparently very confusing when there were two human mommies. On the plus side, this meant when we went out of town, we could just leave our dog with my aunt, and the dog settled in perfectly happy. The location was strange, but human mommy was there, so everything was all right. Right up until my uncle tried to get in bed with his wife. Then our dog would immediately growl, bark, and try to drive away the intruder with all his miniature might. My aunt thought it was hysterical, but for some reason my uncle didn't find this quite as funny. Ooh, that's a tough one. This guy was not only dong blocked, but he was cocker spaniel blocked. Story 4. My next oldest sister was not my twin, but was often mistaken for twins. She was home from boot camp, and I was on a date with my boyfriend. She was doing the bathrobe big bowl of ice cream thing in the kitchen. My boyfriend opened the window of my bedroom and told them to come in. I was almost ready. I'm upstairs in my bedroom, and I hear her yelling and beating on someone. She'd been away. She'd never met my boyfriend. He thought it was me in the kitchen. He said, "Oh, you aren't dressed yet," and reached from behind and put his hands on her boobaloobaloobies. She thought she was being assaulted and started screaming and hitting him and throwing things at him. She'd learned some skills in boot camp. I ran downstairs and she shouted for me to call the police, and he was cowering in the corner of the kitchen trying to explain. Too long didn't read. My boyfriend thought my sister was me and ended up getting a beatdown of epic proportions. Story 5. My husband doesn't have a twin, but we were at a friend's wedding and we were standing around and talking to a few people. This part is important. My husband is 6'0" and I'm 5'0". At this point, we had a few beers and we're feeling good. Out of habit, I leaned over and put my arm around my husband's back and leaned up against him. My husband jumped back, and it was then I realized that my husband had left the circle minutes ago and I had just hugged a different tall man. I've now learned to look up and make sure my husband is next to me before caressing his back. Yep, I'm 5 foot and my husband is 6'3". A couple weeks ago, I almost tried to kiss his sister because she's 5'10", and they were both wearing dark jeans and a red shirt. Once a certain height is met, I guess I just tune out the rest. Plus, they both have long, slim, athletic builds, so it's hard. This one's kind of adorable. It's like when kids go up to the wrong adult at parks and social events thinking that it's their parent and they hug their leg. I guess from a kid's perspective, all tall people look the same. If you're not really looking up, who's to say? I guess it's like Charlie Brown and all the parents are anonymous and wah 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 wah. Or in Powerpuff Girls, how all the adults have their heads cut off and they're out of frame. And on that note, I think it was Confucius that said that elevators smell different for children. Think on that one. Story 6. My husband is a twin. They are mere, not identical, but he and his brother look and sound very different to me. They look similar enough that my dad and other people can't tell them apart because they don't like to be in the same place at the same time, so they're rarely side by side to compare. I worked in the same department as my brother-in-law, got him hired after I married his brother. My boss for the longest time would get mad at my brother-in-law for showing up in jeans. That was my husband. Coworkers would get really confused when they saw my husband and my brother-in-law on different sides of the building, that sort of thing. Most embarrassing for me, being asked if I'd ever had a threesome with them both. I get that question a lot. Story 7. A bit late to party, but a bit of a double whammy for me. Me and my brother sound the same. Even our mom could not tell us apart. Let's call us A and B. In our school days, I had a friend whose big brother also used to be my big brother's friend. Let's call them X and Y. A is friend with X, and B is friend with Y. What we didn't realize is that those two brothers also sound quite the same. Cue the old voice of X as various phones. X calls for me, A. B answers the phone. X recognizes the voice as A. B also recognizes that. They both chat and make important plans about when and where to meet. It was really awkward when my big brother showed up to hang around with my friends without me. As awkward as it was, I guess this is where it would come in handy, that thing when, at least when I was young, you'd call your friend to ask if they could hang out, and you'd accidentally get their parent on the phone because it was landlines and nobody had cell phones, and you would have to say, "Oh, my mom wants to talk to your mom," and they would set up the playdate for you. Then you would at least ensure that you're hanging out with the right person. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.